Layla Morvan was brilliant, ambitious, and always in control, until the day she made a fatal mistake. Elias Corbin was the kind of teacher who never bent the rules, who believed in integrity above all else. When he caught Layla plagiarizing, he thought he was teaching her a lesson. But Layla wasn't the kind of student who accepted failure. The moment Mr. Corbin refused to let her mistake go unnoticed, he unknowingly sealed his fate. Layla believed she could outsmart everyone, erase the problem, and walk away without a trace. She was wrong. Layla Morvan had always been the kind of student teachers held up as an example. She wasn't just intelligent, she was exceptional. From the moment she stepped into West Haven High School, she was determined to be the best. Her grades were flawless, her extracurriculars impressive, and her reputation spotless. She spoke with confidence, carried herself with grace, and never gave anyone a reason to doubt her potential. Teachers adored her. They saw a hard-working, disciplined young woman with a bright future. She was the kind of student who went beyond the required reading, always eager to impress with insights that made her sound wiser than her years. In debates, she never lost an argument, and in group projects she made sure every detail was perfect. Her peers admired her but also feared her. Layla was competitive, and she never settled for second place. If someone outperformed her, she took it personally, but she never showed her disappointment. Instead, she smiled, congratulated the winner, and worked twice as hard to make sure it never happened again. Among all her teachers, Mr. Elias Corbin had the most influence on her. He was West Haven's most respected literature teacher, known for his strict grading and deep passion for books. Unlike other teachers who handed out A's easily, he made his students work for them. Layla respected that. She liked a challenge. She saw Mr. Corbin as someone who understood her ambition, someone who recognized her potential. For years, she had been his top student, the one he relied on to lead class discussions and tutor struggling classmates. They had a mutual understanding. She excelled in his class, and he held her to the highest standard. But admiration was not the only reason Layla cared about Mr. Corbin. His recommendation letter would carry weight when she applied to Ivy League universities. His words could be the difference between an acceptance letter and rejection. Every grade, every assignment, every impression she made in his class mattered. She couldn't afford to disappoint him. To the outside world, Layla was perfect. But perfection was an illusion, and Layla knew how to maintain it well. She knew what to say, how to act, and how to manipulate situations to work in her favor. If she missed a deadline, she had an excuse that made the teacher sympathetic. If she performed poorly on a test, she convinced the teacher to let her retake it. She was charming when she needed to be, cold when it was necessary, and always in control. There was only one problem. Mr. Corbin couldn't be manipulated. He didn't bend the rules for anyone. He didn't care about a student's reputation. He only cared about their work. Layla knew this, which was why she always made sure her work was perfect in his class. But the pressure was building. College application season was approaching, and expectations were higher than ever. There was no room for mistakes. Then, for the first time in her academic career, she made one. It was small, something no one should have noticed. A single essay, one that she had not written herself. She had been too busy, too overwhelmed with other commitments, and had taken a shortcut. She told herself it was harmless, just one assignment, one time. But the moment she submitted it, a nagging fear crept into her mind. What if someone noticed? What if she was caught? At first, nothing happened. Mr. Corbin returned graded essays to the class, and Layla's wasn't among them. She reassured herself that it was fine, that maybe he was just taking longer to grade. But then he called her after class. His face was unreadable as he placed the essay on his desk. "We need to talk," he said. Layla's heart pounded. She had spent years building her reputation, crafting her perfect image. She had come too far to let one mistake ruin everything. She had to do something. She had to fix this. And no matter what it took, she would make sure Mr. Corbin never got in her way. he said. Mr. Corbin had never called Layla in for a private discussion before, and that alone sent a wave of unease through her. She had built her academic career on precision. Every grade, every assignment, every interaction was carefully managed to maintain her perfect record. Yet now she found herself sitting across from her most respected teacher, feeling exposed in a way she never had before. He slid the essay toward her, the red ink on the margin standing out against the crisp white paper. "This isn't your writing," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I've read enough of your work to know that." Layla's mind raced. There had to be a way out of this. A misunderstanding, a misplaced accusation, something she could spin in her favor. She picked up the paper, pretending to study the notes he had written, but her hands felt cold. "Of course it is," she said, forcing a small, uncertain laugh. Maybe I tried a different style this time?" Mr. Corbin wasn't amused. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with a look she had never seen before. It wasn't disappointment exactly. It was worse. It was certainty. He knew. "This isn't a matter of style," he said. "The phrasing, the sentence structure, it's not yours. I checked some passages, and they match an academic paper written 5 years ago." Layla's breath caught in her throat. She had been careless. In her desperation to keep up with her overwhelming workload, she had taken an essay from an obscure source, tweaking only minor details before submitting it. She had convinced herself that no one would notice, but Mr. Corbin had. "I have to report this," he continued. "Plagiarism is a serious offense. You know that." Her mind spun with the implications. If he reported her, the consequences would be devastating. A failing grade was bad enough, but this wasn't just about one assignment. A plagiarism charge would go on her record. It could disqualify her from the prestigious writing competition she had entered. It could destroy her chances at getting into the university she had worked so hard for. One mistake could bring everything crashing down. "No one else has to know," she said quickly. "I made a mistake. It won't happen again." Mr. Corbin's expression didn't change. "That's not how this works, Layla. If I ignore it, I'm not doing my job." Her stomach churned. Of course he wouldn't bend the rules. He never did. She had miscalculated. She tried again, her voice carefully measured. "You know I'm not the kind of student who does this. I was overwhelmed. I wasn't thinking. I've worked so hard for 4 years. Please don't let one mistake define me." His expression softened, but only slightly. "I know you're a hard-working student. That's why I expected better. But integrity matters. If I let this slide, I'm telling you that the rules don't apply to you." Layla swallowed hard. She had run out of arguments, and she could see in his face that nothing she said would change his mind. He had already made his decision. As she walked out of his office, her pulse pounded in her ears. She wasn't just scared. She was furious. Furious that he had caught her. Furious that he wouldn't give her a second chance. Furious that after everything she had done to maintain her reputation, it could all be undone so easily. The anger didn't leave her. It simmered beneath the surface, growing stronger with each passing hour. She imagined what would happen when word got out, how her classmates would whisper, how her teachers would look at her differently, how the schools she had dreamed of attending would reject her without a second thought. By the time she got home, her mind was racing with possibilities. There had to be a way to fix this. And then, slowly, an idea took shape. Mr. Corbin couldn't report her if he wasn't there to do it. She turned the thought over in her mind, testing its weight. It was drastic, it was dangerous, but it was also the only way to make sure she stayed on top. If he wanted to take everything from her, she would make sure he never got the chance. West Haven High School emptied out quickly on Friday afternoons. By 5 p.m., the once buzzy hallways were silent, save for the occasional footsteps of a janitor or a teacher staying late to grade papers. Layla knew this because she had been watching. She had memorized Mr. Corbin's routine. Every Friday, he stayed behind long after the last student had left, finishing his grading before heading home. It was predictable. It was perfect. She had spent the last 24 hours planning every detail. The stolen key had been the hardest part, but not impossible. She had been careful, waiting until the janitor left his cart unattended for just a moment. One quick move, and she had slipped the key into her pocket. She had even worn gloves to avoid fingerprints. Everything had to be clean controlled, no mistakes. By the time the school was nearly empty, she was ready. She entered through the back door, the key sliding easily into the lock. The hallway was dim, lit only by a few emergency lights. The air smelled faintly of floor cleaner and old books. She moved quickly, her footsteps soft against the tile, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Mr. Corbin's classroom was at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, just as she had hoped. She peered inside. He was alone, sitting at his desk, red pen in hand as he marked up another stack of essays. His back was to the door. He hadn't heard her. She had rehearsed the moment over and over. There could be no hesitation, no second thoughts. She stepped inside, silent as a shadow, her grip tightened around the heavy paperweight she had taken from the principal's office earlier that day. It was smooth and solid, perfect for what she needed. One step closer, then another. She raised the weapon. The sound of the impact was dull, almost muffled. Mr. Corbin stiffened, then slumped forward, his pen slipping from his fingers. His head hit the desk with a sickening thud, a dark stain spread across his papers. Layla's breath came fast and shallow, her pulse roaring in her ears. He wasn't dead. Not yet. She raised the paperweight again. Another blow, then another. She didn't stop until the room was completely silent. For a long moment she stood there, staring down at what she had done. The blood had splattered onto her hands, onto her sleeves. She forced herself to take deep, steady breaths. Panic was dangerous. Panic led to mistakes. She moved quickly, wiping down everything she had touched. The desk, the door handle, the edge of the paperweight. She had planned for this, but she hadn't expected the blood to spread so much. She used a few of Mr. Corbin's own papers to clean up what she could, then shoved them into her bag. They would have to be destroyed later. She checked the clock. Less than 5 minutes had passed. It felt like an eternity. She stepped back, surveying the scene. The classroom looked chaotic but not staged. A break-in gone wrong, a robbery. It needed to look random. She grabbed a few of Mr. Corbin's personal items, his watch, his wallet, then tossed them into a nearby trash can in the hallway. If investigators thought it was a botched theft, they might not look too closely at here. Carefully, she retraced her steps, exiting the way she came. The key went back where she had found it. The paperweight was wrapped in plastic and tucked into her backpack. It would be disposed of far from here. As she stepped outside, the cool evening air hit her like a shock. The street was empty, no witnesses, no one had seen her. She had done it. She had fixed everything, and no one would ever know. The next morning, West Haven High School was in chaos. A janitor had arrived early to clean the classrooms and found Mr. Corbin slumped over his desk, motionless. The police were called immediately. By the time students and teachers began arriving for the day, yellow crime scene tape blocked off the entire hallway, and officers were already questioning staff. Layla stood among the crowd, her face a mask of shock and grief. She clutched her backpack tightly, breathing carefully to control her pulse. She had rehearsed her reactions in the mirror before leaving home that morning, practicing the right balance of sadness and confusion. She whispered to classmates, asking what had happened, playing the part of a concerned student flawlessly. When Principal Harland addressed the school over the intercom, his voice was heavy with emotion. It is with deep sadness that we inform you all that Mr. Corbin has passed away. The authorities are investigating the situation and we ask that everyone remain calm. If any student has information that could help, please speak with the police." Layla bowed her head, pretending to process the news. But beneath her act, she was listening carefully. They hadn't called it a murder yet. That was good. It meant they weren't sure what had happened. If they thought it was a break-in gone wrong, they might not look too closely at the students. But her confidence began to waver as the investigation progressed. The police worked quickly, examining every possible angle. Forensics teams combed through the crime scene, and officers interviewed teachers and students. Layla made sure to answer all their questions calmly, keeping her story simple. She had gone straight home after school, spent the evening studying, and hadn't returned to campus. No, she hadn't noticed anything strange the day before. Yes, she was devastated by Mr. Corbin's death. She thought she had done everything right, but then the first mistake surfaced. Security footage. She had been careful to avoid most cameras, but she had overlooked one. An old, partially obscured camera near the back entrance. It wasn't the best quality, but it showed a figure entering the building after hours. The image was grainy, the person's face unclear, but the timestamp placed them inside the school at the exact window of time when Mr. Corbin was killed. When the police asked if anyone had been on campus that evening, Layla kept her expression neutral. Others had surely been in the building too, the janitor, maybe another teacher. They couldn't prove the figure was her. But then came the second mistake, the missing key. The janitor had reported his key missing the morning after the murder. At first, he had assumed he had misplaced it, but when officers conducted a search around campus, they found it discarded near the school dumpster, along with the stolen wallet and watch Layla had tossed to stage the scene. The presence of the key suggested someone had planned the attack rather than it being a random act of violence. Then, the third mistake surfaced. The essay. Investigators, trying to understand if Mr. Corbin had any conflicts with students, had examined his current workload. It didn't take them long to find the essay Layla had plagiarized. Notes in red ink covered the margins, along with a draft of a plagiarism report he had started filling out. That alone wasn't damning. It only showed that Layla had been caught cheating. But when officers requested to see Layla's laptop as part of a standard check, they found the original plagiarized source still open in her browsing history. A stupid oversight, a moment of carelessness. The final mistake was the most incriminating of all. The murder weapon? Layla had planned to dispose of it, but in the rush of covering her tracks, she had left it wrapped in plastic in her backpack, intending to throw it away somewhere far from the school. But when she got home that night, paranoia had taken over. She had feared that if she stepped outside to get rid of it, a neighbor's security camera might catch her, so she had waited. And then waited again. It was still hidden in the back of her closet when the police arrived at her house. When they told her they had a warrant to search her belongings, her world collapsed. She tried to stay calm, but her mind was screaming. She sat stiffly on her bed, watching as officers went through her things, waiting for the moment they found it. It didn't take long. An officer pulled out the plastic-wrapped object, peeling away the layers until the paperweight was exposed. A silence filled the room as they studied the dark stains along its smooth surface. Layla's stomach dropped. She had spent so much time making sure she wouldn't get caught. But in the end, the mistakes had been hers. Layla sat in the small, windowless interrogation room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The walls were a dull gray, the air thick with the scent of old coffee and sweat. The fluorescent light overhead buzzed softly, casting harsh shadows across the table where she sat. She forced herself to stay still, to breathe evenly, to look composed, but inside, panic twisted through her like a vice. They had found the murder weapon, that was undeniable. The blood on it would match Mr. Corbin's. The security footage placed someone at the school during the time of the attack. The missing key had been recovered near the discarded stolen items. And now, with the plagiarized essay and the unfinished plagiarism report found in Mr. Corbin's classroom, the investigators had a motive. She knew what this looked like. She knew what it meant. The door creaked open, and Detective Mara Langley entered. She was a middle-aged woman with sharp, observant eyes and a quiet confidence that made Layla uneasy. She took a seat across from Layla, dropping a thick folder onto the table. "I think you know why you're here," she said, her voice steady but not unkind. Layla swallowed hard but remained silent. Langley opened the folder, flipping through the pages. "You're an exceptional student, Layla. Straight A's, a perfect academic record, but we both know something changed." She slid a copy of Mr. Corbin's notes toward Layla. "Your teacher caught you plagiarizing, and he was going to report you. That could have cost you everything. Your reputation, your future." She tapped a finger on the page. "And then, just hours after confronting you, he was murdered." Layla's nails dug into her palms. She had prepared for pressure, but sitting here now, she felt the weight of it pressing down on her, suffocating her. She couldn't let them see her break. Langley leaned forward slightly. "We found the murder weapon in your closet, Layla, wrapped in plastic, hidden away. It still has traces of Mr. Corbin's blood." She let the words settle before continuing. "You had access to the stolen key. The security footage places someone entering the school at the right time, and we found your browsing history showing you accessed the plagiarized essay's original source just before submitting it." She exhaled, shaking her head. "This isn't looking good for you." Layla felt her control slipping. She had convinced herself that she was too smart to get caught, that she had covered her tracks. But now, as the evidence stacked against her, the reality was inescapable. She could deny it, she could claim someone had framed her, but the facts were too damning. Langley studied her. "This didn't have to happen, Layla. A bad grade, even a plagiarism charge. That's not the end of the world. But you couldn't handle failure, could you?" Layla felt her throat tighten. She wanted to argue, to fight back, to control the situation, but there was nothing left to control. Langley's voice softened. "I think you panicked. You made a terrible mistake, and now you're trapped in it. But lying won't help you now. The truth is your only chance at leniency." Layla lowered her gaze. She had spent years crafting an image of perfection, of control, of absolute success. And now, all of it was crumbling around her. A silence stretched between them. Then Langley spoke again, her voice firm. "Layla Morvan, you're under arrest for the murder of Elias Corbin." The words echoed in her head, hollow and final. As the cold steel of handcuffs closed around her wrists, Layla realized that for the first time in her life, she had lost.